Is it possible to buy a business without using any of your own money? Well, yes, of course it is. But is it possible to buy a substantial business, a business doing millions of pounds of revenue for effectively nothing? Well, again, yes, it is. And in this interview, I want to show you how it's done, and I want to show you what's possible when you know how to do it. So this is a live interview that I did in front of my private client group with Peter Kiddle, who I've known for a very long time. In fact, years ago, he helped me sell a business. But since then, he's been buying businesses himself. And in this interview, you'll hear how he's bought multi-million-pound revenue businesses for absolutely nothing. So enjoy the interview, be inspired, subscribe to the channel, and I'm sure you're going to have fun watching this.
I think in terms of starting, I have not had a privileged background. Both my parents worked in a factory in North London. I came into the business world by mistake and learned by my mistakes. The way in which I've created my businesses and operated since has been by making lots of mistakes. And I hope that my give back to the world is through sessions like this, and hopefully you won't make the same sort of mistakes that I've made in my time. And I believe there are two ways of running a business, and there's the difficult way and there's the easy way. And what you're looking at over the period of this program, of course, is the easy way rather than the hard way. I spent sort of nearly 15 years doing it the hard way. And it got to about the 10-year stage, and I'd grown this business from nothing to about a £2.5 million business, which for me was amazing. When I think back, it should have been a lot more than that, but I didn't know at the time. I then thought, well, let's try this acquisition thing, because I've heard and read about it. I don't know anything about it. There were no programs like this going on, so I just went for it. And I acquired my first business and went with a broker, can't remember who it was, and agreed to pay 4 times profit before tax for that business, because that's what everyone told me was the going rate at the time. And then I thought about it once I'd done the deal, because I wasn't thinking ahead. Well, if I keep that business trading as it is, it's going to take me 4 years before I get my money back. How ridiculous is that? I didn't have any plans as to how I was going to grow it. I just thought turnover. Oh, I can add another $1 million to my turnover. That's wonderful. And of course, turnover is vanity. Profit is sanity. And I hadn't got that message very clearly communicated to myself. Every deal that I've done since has been very different. But I did manage to sell my training business by adding a couple of acquisitions by organic growth. Got it to a £5 million turnover and sold it cash, £5 million in my back pocket, and off I went. They were so naive, the acquiring bodies, that they just said, don't need Kiddle, he's useless, let's get rid of him quickly. And I was very happy to retire at the age of 50. That only lasted 3 weeks before I started again, but still. The company traded for about another 1.5 years and started to get into trouble. After 2 years of trading, the administrator was called in and they'd gone bust. So there's a little message here that if you're acquiring, the principle that's going can be very useful, but it's very difficult to get any form of cooperation from them. So as Jonathan will have said, drain everything from them as quickly as you can, because you may be on your own. So there you are. This business that I had was turning over 5 million. By the time they'd gone bust, it had dropped to 4 million. And they owed quite a lot of money. I then was called in by the administrator to see if I could help sort things out a bit for them. And it became very clear that this was an opportunity to buy this business back. And I found out through the back door by talking to some of the support staff, not the actual lead administrator, that their fee for doing the administration on this deal was 60 grand. There's no way they would sell that business for anything less than 60 grand. They may have been asking for £1 million for this business, but I knew it was somewhere between 60 grand and £1 million to buy it back. So I did a deal. I bought that company back for 60 grand. I also did a deal with the administrator that I would collect all the debts in for them and give the money to them. And I charged £60,000 for that. I don't know where I got those two figures from, but anyway, so I managed to buy it back for £0. 2 years later, sold it again for £5 million. So there's a moral here that if you can find a business that's in administration and you can work the administrator and get the right deal and offer something back, you can get some great deals. I mean, really great deals. I bought a company 3 years ago, turning over £2.5 million a year. And when I looked at it initially, they were losing £80,000 a month. Now, it's quite difficult to lose 80 grand a month on a £2.5 million turnover, but that was exactly what the case was. And everyone else that had looked at that deal walked away. Why would you take on that level of risk? It would be mad to do so. My due diligence is somewhat focused. I go straight to the FD and I start going through the figures with the FD to find out where the main drains on cost will be. The staff have been there forever, and that's because they were all overpaid. You know, the minimum middle manager level salary was over 100,000 a year. Should have been paying about half that. The whole sales thing was non-existent. They just relied upon clients rebooking. So before I did that deal, I negotiated with the landlord. I showed them the accounts. I said, this business is losing 80 grand a month. They've got 80 grand left in the kitty. They are going to go bust in 1 month, and you will lose all the arrears, and you will lose the tenant as well. Let's do a deal. I'll pay you a small proportion of those arrears if you let us out of the lease straight away. Took about 3 or 4 days to do the deal, but the landlord agreed. I looked at the staffing cost, knew there had to be redundancies, and then knew that I could get that business back into break even fairly quickly. The lease was £250,000 a year. So I've now got a business that is making huge losses, an owner MD that's 64 years old, absolutely hacked off with the whole thing. Frightened that if another day goes by, they'll have to put more money in, or they'll be trading insolvently, and we know the dangers of that. So I said to the owner, look, let me just check what I've got in my pocket. £1. I'll buy your business for £1 and you can get out with credibility. All he really wanted to do was to be able to say to his mates, run that business for 30 years and I managed to sell it to somebody else at the end. Not mentioning it was only £1, because that's not good for the ego, but by exploring what the drivers are for the seller, you can identify what you can get away with. Another little story. Remembering I was saying that you've got to walk away. If there's a deal that's not good for you, you've got to walk away. Let me give you the facts of this particular one. Business turning over 2.5 million. Don't know why it's always 2.5 million. They were struggling. For years and years, they'd broken even. MD had tried everything, he said. I just can't seem to break out of this pattern of breaking even every year. So he was advertising for an investor. What that really meant was he wanted to have some money in the business so he could continue trading at break even, but it wouldn't have an impact on him because he wouldn't have to dip into his own pocket. So I agreed that I could be an investor. He didn't know I only had £1 in my pocket, by the way. He agreed that I would then be able to meet the people. I met the finance director first, and I said to him, what's your pain? What's the biggest problem? He said, well, staffing is the biggest cost, but we've really analysed this carefully. We can't get rid of anyone. They're all critical, they're all needed. The big problem is the rent on this place is nearly £300,000 a year. We don't really need it all, but we need most of it. But we're in a long-term lease. So I go and see the operations people. It's a training company. And they said, our biggest problem is that we have programs like this where we have people from all different companies, it's not private individuals, and we have to book hotels like this, and we spend about £250,000 a year on these hotels to run our training programs. I speak to the sales director. What's your issue? He said, well, we've got loads of small customers, but we can't break into the British Telecoms, the Vodafones of this world, because we're too small. They come to see us, they come to our current office, there's only 40 of us, we try and space ourselves out, but we still look small. And then they go away because they won't take the risk. Go back to the MD, and he says, I haven't got any money. I can't do anything. I can't invest in more advertising or anything. I haven't got any money. So, MD, no money. Sales director, can't get big clients. Finance director, offices are very expensive. Operations people, venues are too expensive. How on earth could I improve on that? Because everything these people said to me was right. They were, there was no flannel. They did need all those things. I had to make a decision. Do I buy for whatever sum, or do I walk away? I did buy. Again for £1. And what I did was I found locally new premises that had educational covenants in the deeds, which meant this property was only £1 million. Actually, it should have been 2 or 3. Lovely manor house, beautiful marble pillars, staircase with chandelier. I did a deal with the bank to get a commercial mortgage over 10 years. They wanted a deposit. I wouldn't give it to them. I wouldn't give them a personal guarantee, but I did give them a fixed and floating charge over the assets of the business. So I got a 100% mortgage and agreed that would cost us, in terms of capital repayments, £100,000 a year plus interest, which was actually a lot less than the rent of those offices. Okay, tick. That's the first thing I've managed to achieve. So I've gone from paying £200,000 or £300,000 a year to about 150, making money now. Now, this new premises, all the staff could fit on the top floor. And your point at the back with the beard is absolutely spot on. I've now got training rooms on the ground floor. I got out of the lease with the old offices because, same old story, we're going to go bust, you've got no choice, blah, blah, blah. And we had huge availability for us to run our own courses, and we went from spending an awful lot of money to spending virtually nothing. So the £200,000 or so that we were spending on hotels like this dropped to about £20,000 a year. Lovely thing was that this beautiful manor house always had about 70 or 80 cars in the car park because we had all the delegates visiting plus the staff. Now we go back to the sales director. Now we've got a different story. Potential clients come up, they can't park their car because there's no space. It looks huge. Marble pillars, staircase, chandelier. They come in, this is a really big organisation. Now we have access to larger clients. The turnover, which had been static for about 6 years, not in the first year, but in the second year, went to £5 million because we're able to access those bigger clients. Bigger clients don't need the sort of staffing that you do with smaller clients. It costs a lot to acquire and maintain 100 clients. To have 2 more clients, both spending £750,000 or whatever, is quite easy to manage. So we did that with the existing staffing. Of the £2.5 million, taking away the variable costs, we got about £1 million profit out of that. We had the profits from the training centre activities. We had the profits from the venue. Put it all together, we were turning over, within a year, £5 million with 25% profit before tax.
Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you, Peter.